Welcome to Reinventing Broadcast, where AI meets content. Hosted by Ben Anker. Let's dive in.
There is a version of this industry that exists only on a trade show floor. You know the one. Big screens, a stand the size of a small house, and a presenter who does not exist telling you about a technology that will change everything. Synthetic anchors, fully automated newsrooms, a voice that says, imagine a world where, and then you fly home and you walk into a real media operations room at 3 a.m, and what is actually running is nothing like the stand. It is a transcription job queued against yesterday's rushes. It is a tagging engine chewing through an outside broadcast dump. It is a compliance flag sitting in somebody's queue, waiting for a human to agree or disagree with it. Not a single one of those made it into a keynote. All of them are in production right now. So this episode is a stock take, and deliberately an unglamorous one. Not what artificial intelligence might do to broadcasting. What it is genuinely doing this morning in the workflow, around the content. And I want to be strict about that boundary. This is not about scheduling or advertising or the business layer. This is about what happens to a piece of video between the moment it is shot and the moment it goes out.
Then let us start with scale, because the industry loves a survey, and I want to know whether this is real adoption or a lot of pilots wearing a suit. How many broadcasters are actually doing this?
The most useful number I have seen came out of the annual Broadcast Transformation Research, and it is this. Around a quarter of broadcasters now report using artificial intelligence in some form. The year before, that figure was 9%. So it has roughly tripled in 12 months. Another 41% expect to adopt within 2 years. And, because this is the number the vendors never quote back to you, 48% said they had no immediate plans at all. So this is not a stampede. It is roughly a quarter of the industry in, a quarter about to be, and half of it standing at the side of the pool. And when you ask the buyers which specific thing will matter most, the answers are extremely down to earth. 44% said automated production of clips and highlights. 33% said summarizing and transcription. Nobody is telling a survey that their strategic priority is a synthetic newsreader.
So rank them for me. If a technology maturity curve were drawn for broadcast specifically, what is already boring and reliable, and what is still standing at the top of the hype waving?
The research I trust on this splits it very cleanly. Delivering reliable value already, and effectively becoming plumbing, you have 3. Metadata, subtitling and localization, compliance, sitting up at the peak of expectation, still exploratory, still mostly demo. You have artificial anchors and the fully automated newsroom. And I find that split genuinely funny, because it is the exact inverse of the coverage. The things that got the headlines are the things that did not ship. The things nobody wrote about are the things now running unattended in the middle of the night. So let us take the 3 that shipped, in order of how deep they go.
Start with metadata then, since you have spent a good chunk of your career inside asset management projects, and I suspect you have opinions.
Metadata is the deepest and the least visible. Here is the pitch, and the pitch is true. You point a model at an archive and it produces speech to text, face recognition, object and logo detection, shot classification, and a searchable transcript layer across everything you own. Work that used to be a cataloguing team working for months becomes a processing job measured in days. I have watched teams find material in an afternoon that they had written off as unfindable, which in practice had meant relicensing something they already owned. But here is the part the demonstration never covers. The performance of these systems depends far less on the model than on the state of the data you point it at. Every media asset management project I have ever worked on had the same archaeology. Metadata from the tape era, metadata from the first digital migration, metadata from the system you bought in 2014, and 3 different naming conventions from 3 different people who have all since left. Point a very clever model at that, and you do not get intelligence. You get confident nonsense at scale, and you get it faster than you can check it.
Which is the thing that bothers me most about auto-tagging. A tag is a promise. If the machine tags a clip as a particular politician and it is wrong and somebody pulls that clip for a news package on deadline, the mistake does not stay in the database. It goes on air. Where is the safety net?
It is exactly the right worry. And the answer is that the safety net has to be structural rather than optimistic. Two things. First, precision matters far more than recall in our industry, and most vendors sell you recall. Recall is how much of the relevant material the system finds. Precision is how much of what it finds is actually right. A tool that finds 90% of everything but is wrong 1 time in 10 is a disaster in a newsroom. And a tool that finds 60% and is essentially never wrong is a gift. Ask for precision figures. Ask on your content, not their demo reel. Second, insist on confidence scores being exposed in the interface rather than hidden. There is an enormous operational difference between a system that says this is definitely him and a system that says I am 70% sure this is him. Because the second one lets a journalist make a decision and the first one invites them to skip one. Any vendor who will not show you the confidence layer is selling you a magic trick.
Compliance next, and this is the one I would have bet against. Because compliance is not a technical judgment, it is a regulatory one, and I struggle to see a broadcaster telling a regulator that the machine cleared it.
And you would be right that no broadcaster would ever say that out loud. But compliance is nonetheless one of the 3 genuinely mature use cases, and it is worth understanding why. The regulator here published its own approach to artificial intelligence for the coming year on the 4th of June, and it included a case study on how the technology is being used in the broadcast sector, alongside research into synthetic media risks and the specific problem of compliance in live context. So the regulator is actively watching the space rather than banning it. What has actually been deployed is not automated judgment, it is automated triage. Systems that scan output and flag candidates. Strong language, brand prominence, flashing imagery, product placement, watershed, sensitive material, and increasingly ad break and content boundary detection. What that does is invert the economics of compliance viewing. Historically, a compliance viewer watched everything in order to find the small percentage of things that mattered, and the cost of that scaled linearly with volume, which in a world of multiple channels and streaming variants and localized versions became unaffordable. The machine now watches everything, and the human watches the flags, and I want to be precise about the boundary, because this is where I have seen people get careless. The flag is a candidate, the judgment is a person, and critically, the accountability is neither of them. The accountability sits with the license holder always, and it does not transfer to a vendor because you bought a tool. If a regulator comes to you about a breach, no procurement contract in the world will make that somebody else's problem.
Localization is the third, and that one I would guess is the fastest to pay for itself.
It is, and the driver is not creative ambition, it is deadlines and obligations. Accessibility requirements and multi-territory delivery windows create a volume of subtitling, captioning and dubbing work that no human supply chain can absorb at the price the market pays. So the technology walked straight into a gap. And the workflow shape here is the most elegant of the 3 because a single pass now yields several deliverables. You transcribe once, and out of that you get captions, translated subtitles, and increasingly a dubbed audio track that keeps some of the original speaker's characteristics. 1 process, 3 outputs, all of them close to broadcast usable. Close, but the human is still in the chain, and the reason is beautifully specific. Machines are still poor at intent, sarcasm, where the tone contradicts the literal words, regional slang, cultural references that translate word for word into something meaningless, or in the worst case offensive. A human reviewer catches when a speaker's meaning is the opposite of their sentence. So the mature deployments are all what the localization industry calls human in the loop, which is a slightly clinical way of saying the machine does the typing and the person keeps the responsibility.
And post-production, which is where I imagine most of the fear lives. Give me the honest state of it.
Sport is the proof case, and the numbers there are the most dramatic in this entire episode. A live pipeline that used to require a room of editors can now cover 9 matches at once, produce something in the order of 15 to 30 clips per match, deliver them in real time rather than after the final whistle, handle every aspect ratio and format automatically, and be supervised by 1 or 2 operators. That is not a productivity improvement. That is a different shape of department. Away from live sport, in scripted and factual post, the honest framing is that these tools produce a strong rough cut and remove somewhere between 60 and 80% of the mechanical work, the logging, the syncing, the string outs, the first assembly. What they do not do, and no serious editor claims otherwise, is deliver something you would publish without a human passing over it. And in visual effects, the picture is similar, with automated pipelines for rotoscoping and frame level cleanup delivering cost reductions in the region of 30 to 40% on the repetitive end of the work.
Then answer the question everybody in this industry is actually asking and nobody puts in a press release. Is this augmentation or is it headcount?
It is both, and pretending otherwise insults the audience. When one pipeline replaces 9 editors with 2 operators, that is not augmentation for the 7. But I will say something more useful than a slogan, which is that there is a pattern to which jobs have gone and which have not, and it is remarkably consistent. Look at every deployment that has actually succeeded, and you will find 3 shared characteristics. 1. The task was high volume and repetitive. 2. The failure mode was cheap and obvious, meaning a wrong tag or a bad subtitle gets caught and corrected without anybody dying or being sued. 3. And this is the one everybody misses, there was already a human sign-off gate in the process before the technology arrived. Compliance had a viewer, localization had a reviewer, post had an editor approving the cut. The machine slotted in underneath an existing checkpoint. Now look at the ones that stalled, the anchors and the automated newsrooms. Same volume argument, same efficiency case, but no pre-existing gate, because nobody had ever needed to approve a presenter's face. The deployments that worked were not the ones with the best technology. They were the ones that landed in a workflow that already knew how to say no.
So Monday morning, what does someone running a media operation actually do with all of this?
5 things. 1. Pick your first use case by looking for that existing sign-off gate, rather than by looking for the biggest saving, because the gate is what makes the saving survivable. 2. Fix your taxonomy and your rights metadata before you buy anything, because you cannot automate your way out of a data problem, and you will simply industrialize the mess. 3. Evaluate on precision, on your own content, with your own edge cases, and treat any vendor benchmark as marketing. 4. Demand confidence scores in the user interface, because the whole model depends on humans knowing when to look harder. 5. Write down where accountability sits before the first pilot, rather than after the first incident, and make sure everyone in the chain can name the person, not the system. And I will finish with the thought I keep coming back to. The most consequential artificial intelligence in broadcast this year did not present a bulletin, did not write a script, and did not appear on a stand. It tagged the rushes, wrote the subtitles, and flagged the strong language. It is dull, it is deeply useful, and it is already load-bearing. The revolution turned up in the machine room wearing a high vis, and everyone was looking at the stage.
Thanks for listening to Reinventing Broadcast. Subscribe for more on AI content and the future of media. And visit ancast.tv for more info on Ben himself, the resources, other content, and news.